Every go-around is unhappy in its own way. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Leo Tolstoy, Anna Karenina. Every smooth landing looks the same from the cabin, steady, predictable, comforting. But every go-around, that sudden surge of thrust, that unexpected climb back into the sky, has its own story to tell. From a literary point of view, sad stories often make richer and more compelling narratives than the happy ones. They're the moments when characters are tested and the story takes an unexpected turn. In the story of a flight, the go-around is that turning point, a defensive and essential safety maneuver in aviation, performed when the pilot discontinues a landing to re-enter the air. It occurs whenever conditions are no longer suitable for a safe landing. An unstable approach, a sudden shift in weather, or a hazard on the runway. In that instant, the crew chooses to avoid risk and restore safety, climbing back to altitude to prepare for another approach, or if necessary, a diversion. Whatever the cause, one truth remains. A go-around is not a failure, but quite the opposite, a deliberate decision to reset safety. To initiate a go-around, Airbus procedures require flight crews to move the thrust levers to the TOGA detent. This not only commands maximum available thrust, but also triggers the correct FMA modes and activates the missed approach sequence in the FMS. With flaps not at zero, several automatic actions occur. SRS, Speed Reference System, and GA TRK, Go-Around Track, modes engage. The go-around phase activates in the FMS, making the missed approach the active flight plan. The previous approach is automatically reconnected after the missed approach sequence. Speed brakes retract automatically. Attitude becomes the main flight reference since the go-around is a dynamic maneuver. However, in many situations, especially at light weights or when the missed approach altitude is low, maximum thrust isn't necessary and may create an excess energy condition. Therefore, after selecting TOGA to correctly engage the go-around logic, the crew should reduce thrust to the climb detent if full TOGA is not required. This maintains proper energy management and ensures a smooth, controlled go-around. During the go-around, SRS mode commands the aircraft to climb at the higher of VLS, VAPP, or IAS at the moment of TOGA selection, limited to VLS plus 25 knots with all engines, or VLS plus 15 knots single engine, until reaching the acceleration altitude, where the target speed increases to green dot. GA track mode maintains the track memorized when TOGA was selected, and the missed approach route becomes the active flight plan. Nav mode then engages automatically or manually to follow it. Because high bypass engines take a few seconds to spool up, a temporary loss of altitude can occur right after TOGA selection, especially if thrust was at idle or the airspeed was low. So, the crew must anticipate this behavior and maintain attitude until positive climb is established. If TOGA is selected while flaps are at zero, the aircraft does not enter the go-around phase. The autopilot and flight director remain in approach or landing modes, GS, LOC, land, or flare. The FMS stays in approach phase, and lever climb flashes on the FMA. As a result, the airplane gains excess energy but continues to follow the approach path, a potentially unsafe situation. The crew must act immediately to correct the configuration and regain proper flight mode control. In Airbus logic, flaps are the key, no flap, no flip, and that's how a go-around can turn into a flop. When TOGA is selected in this clean configuration, the SRS mode does not engage, and the go-around must be flown manually. Immediately after TOGA selection and rotation, the flight director should be turned off to prevent misleading guidance, since it remains in approach or landing mode. The pilot flies toward the go-around pitch target manually, maintaining attitude until positive climb. At acceleration altitude, the crew sets speed to green dot before selecting climb to transition back to normal climb. When leaving the go-around phase, the goal is to establish the correct target speed and flight management predictions according to the crew's next plan, either a second approach or a diversion. Second approach. The crew activates the approach phase on the MCDU Performance Go-Around page. The FMS then reverts to approach logic, adjusting target speeds according to flap configuration, for example green dot for flaps 0. Before commencing, the crew confirms waypoint sequencing, revises performance data, and completes the approach checklist, ensuring the missed approach route remains available should another go-around occur. Diversion. Once established in safe flight, the crew transitions the FMGS from go-around to climb phase. Depending on pre-planning, this can be done by selecting Enable Alternate if an alternate flight plan was loaded in the active flight plan, activating the secondary flight plan if prepared there, or, if no alternate was ready, initiating a selected climb, then inserting a new destination once clear of terrain. The crew then updates route, cruise level, and cost index to match the diversion strategy. A go-around near the ground demands precision, awareness, and commitment. As long as the thrust levers have not been selected into the reverse detent, a go-around is still possible. However, once the levers are brought into the reverse idle notch, the go-around must no longer be attempted. Engine manufacturers do not guarantee symmetrical thrust once reverse has been selected. Moving the levers forward to TOGA from that position may cause asymmetric power application, leading to uncontrolled yaw and a potential loss of control. If a go-around is initiated near the ground, the crew should remember, avoid excessive rotation rate to prevent tail strike. If the engines are at idle, expect a few seconds of spool-up delay. Maintain pitch until speed builds to VAPP. A brief runway contact is acceptable during the maneuver. Only once the aircraft is safely established in the climb should the crew retract flaps one step and raise the landing gear. If TOGA is applied while the aircraft is still on the runway, temporary configuration warnings may appear. These are transient and should be disregarded. In rare cases, the FMS may incorrectly enter the go-around phase, typically after takeoff, when the aircraft is above acceleration altitude and the thrust levers are set to TOGA with at least configuration 1 selected. To correct this and return to normal operation, the crew can insert a new destination, different from the current destination, or select the alternate destination in the FMS. Once the climb phase is reactivated, the crew should re-enter the intended destination to restore the correct flight plan. The execution of a go-around should be like a choreography with a deliberate, practiced exchange between the two pilots. Either the pilot flying leads or the pilot monitoring commands him to go around. The pilot flying calls going around flaps. The pilot monitoring watches closely verifying the rotation, checking the engine's spool toward TOGA, and then moves the flap lever one step up. Flaps 3, flaps 2, or flap 1 if in an overweight situation. The pilot flying confirms what the aircraft is doing, reading the FMA, manual TOGA Ceres, go around track or nav. Then comes the next call from the pilot monitoring, positive climb, and the response, gear up. Each call, each reply, like a rally in tennis, passes awareness back and forth. Two voices, one rhythm, one airplane. A calm, coordinated sequence that turns an unexpected event into a perfectly managed one. In Tolstoy's world, unhappiness revealed the individuality of human experience. In ours, the go-around reveals the ability to recognize when things don't go as planned and the resolve to set them right, so that every flight can still end like a happy family. Dear family, see you in the next episode.